Lesson 1-4 is about properties of numbers. Notice that you have the essential question at the top of the page and your I can statements. But this lesson is a little different in that I took a screenshot of the key concepts from the textbook and then I whited out some of the areas where I want you to fill in from the textbook. So I'll go to the textbook in just a second, but this lesson actually has 2 pages, and again, you're going to be filling in the key concept boxes using your textbook. I still have a few problems that we're going to look at together from this lesson, so please make sure you fill those out as we go through this video. Going to the textbook, we're looking at, again, lesson 1-4, and we're talking about properties of numbers. And properties of numbers are really important throughout all of your math courses. And I know that you've heard some of these words before, but we're going to hit them again in pre-algebra so that you can have one more exposure to them. So make sure you get your what you'll learn statements into your notes and then fill in this area right here, the symbols and the examples. You're not defining all of the words in this lesson, so you're defining them by copying down the symbols and the examples from the textbook. So make sure you get those down, and also for the associative properties. So the commutative property works for both addition and multiplication. That just means we can switch around the order and we get the same answer. And then the associative property is the grouping property. So we can associate with different people, but we're still all friends. And that works with addition and multiplication as well. And get those examples into your text or into your notes. And on to page 20, I want to take a look at the number properties also with identity. We have the additive identity, the multiplicative identity, and then the multiplicative property of 0. And that's very simple. Your identity does not change when you add 0. So the identity of any number does not change when you add a 0 to it. Just like the multiplicative identity means that when you multiply by 1, the identity doesn't change. Okay, we're still going to get the same number when we multiply by 1. And finally, when we multiply by 0, the multiplicative property of 0 states that for any number, when you multiply by 0, you get 0. Okay, a counterexample is a really important word here to define. Make sure you get that in your notes, and that just shows you that a statement is not true, and you can say that it's not true by providing a counterexample showing that that does not hold true. Okay, looking at example 1, it says to ask whether subtraction of decimals is associative. If not, give a counterexample. So we know subtraction of any numbers is not associative, but let's just give an example with decimals. So we'll say 5.2 take away 1.1 take away 2.3. Okay. And what the associative property says that I could group these two together. Okay, so let's group those two together. What's 5.2 take away 1.1? Well, that's equal to 4.1. Okay, and when we take away 2.3, okay, we get a subtraction problem here. We need to borrow, and we get 1.8. So with this example right here, we get an answer of 1.8. But the associative property says that I can take those same numbers, 5.2 and 1.1 and 2.3. Okay, let me rewrite the problem out here if you can read that. And if I put parentheses, if I group them differently, I have 1.1 minus 2.3. So that's actually equal to a negative 1.2. Okay. And then when I take 5.2 minus that, the two negatives turn into a positive, and 5.2 plus 1.2 is 6.4. So I get an entirely different answer when I associate different numbers together. So that's the counterexample of why decimals don't subtraction of decimals is not associative. Make sure you get that onto your note sheet. You can provide a different example than what I've shown, or you can use the same example. For example 2, it's asking for the property shown. Okay, so in A here in the example, we have 4A and 3, and we have A and 3 and 4. And so all we did is moved around the 4 to the other position. So that's actually the commutative property. Don't get tricked by this one because a lot of students think parentheses mean the associative property, and that's not necessarily the case. We have 4 plus a value, and we have that value plus 4. So we just switched positions, so that's the commutative property. And in this case, we are multiplying by 1, so that's the multiplicative identity. Okay, in 2a, we're adding 0, so that's the addition property or the additive identity. For 2b, we're multiplying by 1, so that's a multiplicative identity property. In 2c, we have 14 plus 9 plus 10 and 14 plus 9 plus 10. So we are actually grouping numbers differently. So that's going to be our associative property. And make sure you say associative property of addition because that works for both addition and multiplication. So make sure you put that addition part in there. And then finally we have 5 times 7 times 2 equals 7 times 2 times 5. So we just changed the order around there. So that's the commutative property of multiplication. Notice that in the answer key it just says identity with an X or commutative with an X for multiplication. That's okay to do it that way too. Going on to the next page, we're going to do one more example here. At the top of page 21, we have another vocabulary word, which is simplify. And simplify just means that we're going to make it as simple as possible. Okay, so I don't say that I'm 40 plus 2 years old. Okay, I say that I'm 42 because I'm going to simplify as much as I can. Same thing with algebraic expressions. Take it down as far as you can. Okay, and then using facts and properties and rules is a fancy word called deductive reasoning. And deductive reasoning is just meaning that we're going to use the information we have to get down to the final answer. Okay, a lot of professions use deductive reasoning. So lawyers use the facts and the rules to come down to their stance on an issue. And even doctors use deductive reasoning to assess patients when they come in. So it's not just a math thing, it's used quite a bit in all areas. So for the got it problems, 3A, B, C, and D, all of these numbers are being multiplied. So we can simply simplify that by combining the 12 and the 10 together. Remember, the associative property means that we can group things differently, and we can take 12 times 10 to make 120, and then 120 times z could be written as 120z. Of course, you could put a dot there showing multiplication. You could put an asterisk there showing multiplication. The only thing I would not do is put an X for multiplication because then it looks like a variable. 120xz means something different in algebra. So either a dot or an asterisk or even parentheses is fine. For 3b, we have 15 plus w plus 16. And again, the associative property of addition says that I can group the 15 and the 16 together to make 31. And simplified, that would just be 31 plus w. For 3c, I see a 0 there, so the multiplicative property of 0 means that anything times 0 is 0, so the simplest form of 3c is 0. Finally, on D, we again have an associative property problem where we can group the 10 and the 18 to make 28, and so the simplified version is 28 plus P. I hope that gets you through some of the property work on lesson 1-4. You also have a worksheet to practice this skill. You have a couple of videos that you could watch in addition. You also have an Ed puzzle for this lesson. Okay, and an Ed puzzle is something that you watch and you fill out a note sheet on that. Let me scroll back up to the top here of your notes. This is the Edpuzzle notes, and you only have one Edpuzzle this chapter, and it's about math properties. So you can scan this QR code here and watch that, and then fill in the blanks on this sheet as you watch that Edpuzzle. In future chapters, you'll have more than one Edpuzzle, but for this first chapter, we'll start slow, and you just have one to watch for this chapter. Good luck with that. Let me know if you have any questions.